a high-class cool girl.
The movie begins by introducing a dystopian future where society has eradicated privacy through a pervasive surveillance system. The scene begins with a view of a city that appears cold, sterile, and highly controlled. The camera follows a man as he walks through the city streets, with his surroundings overlaid with digital data. Information about everything and everyone is instantly accessible through augmented reality. The man, a detective named Sal Frieland, casually observes passers-by, each person's details and history appearing before his eyes. This is made possible by a network called the Ether, which records everything people see, hear, and do. After Sal Frieland encounters the man in the interrogation room who is concerned about his missing son, Sal reviews the digital data in the ether, revealing that the son had jumped from a building, committing suicide. The scene then shifts to Sal being approached by a woman who had lost her jewelry. She asks to review the maid's record, along with two other individuals related to a murder. While Sal is handling these routine inquiries, he stumbles upon another murder case, one that stands out due to a significant anomaly. He cannot access the victim's data. This discovery alarms Sal, leading him to the crime scene. At the scene, Sal meets with Charlie, who informs him about the victim, James Cray, who had been shot just over an hour ago. However, what makes this case unique and troubling is that Cray's digital record is blocked, preventing access to the usual point-of-view footage. When Sal reviews the available data, he realizes that instead of seeing the murder from the victim's perspective, he is seeing it from the killer's point of view. This suggests that the killer had hacked into Cray's mind's eye, allowing the killer to see through Cray's eyes, and then switch the perspective to his own, effectively erasing his digital footprint. Charlie confirms Sal's suspicion that the killer managed to manipulate the ether to show the victim's death from the killer's perspective, making it appear as though Cray was alone when he was killed. This kind of hacking is unprecedented, and it leaves no trace, no metadata, no signature, and no way to identify the murderer. Charlie then told him that this murder matched another unsolved case in Baltimore, where the victim's POV was similarly hacked, and the last visitor's ID had been scrubbed. Sal also shares that he saw a woman earlier in the day who had no digital footprint. The next day, with the help of Lester, an IT expert, Sal delves deeper into the case. They uncover that the victim had an unknown visitor shortly before his death, but no evidence of this meeting can be found. Lester explains how they analyzed the victim's records and discovered some anomalies, footage that had been subtly altered to conceal illegal activities. The edits were so precise that they went unnoticed by authorities, allowing the victim to escape charges of insider trading. They also find traces of a mysterious visitor whose presence had been completely erased from the record. Sal connects these findings to the mysterious woman he encountered the day before. Her description matches the last person seen with another victim, and to his shock, he realizes that she has been erased from his life record as well. This leads him to suspect that someone has tampered with his memories. After finishing his work, Sal revisits an old recording of his son. Feeling a surge of emotion, he tries to reach out to his ex-wife Kristen to remind her that their son's birthday is tomorrow. However, Kristen, now married to another man, tells Sal to stop holding on to memories of their son, as he has already passed away. The conversation becomes tense when Kristen's husband, who is frustrated by Sal's persistent calls, interjects. Kristen then questions whether Sal has been drinking and demands to see a record of his last 10 years. Hurt and frustrated by the direction of the conversation, Sal abruptly ends the call. Not long after his tense conversation with Kristen, another murder case surfaces. This time, the victims are two girls whose visions were also hijacked, leaving no trace of the perpetrator. When Sal arrives at the scene, an officer informs him that the killer's point of view has no identifiable signature, making it impossible to track. The officer explained that he was the first responder, arriving because he was in the neighborhood, but most of the team was still on their way. Sal learns that the only other person in the house is the housekeeper, who was downstairs when the murders occurred. She's visibly shaken but manages to describe a visitor with long brown hair. Sal reviews the maid's recording and, to his horror, realizes that the killer is still in the house. Acting quickly, he searches for the intruder, but Anon gets the jump on them, killing the guard. Sal pursues her in a desperate chase that leads to a train station. Just as he closes in, his vision suddenly glitches, disorienting him. In the chaos, Sal is struck by a train and falls to the side. As the investigation progresses, the detectives discover that the perpetrator insists on being paid in cash, a currency that cannot be hacked, which forces her to meet clients face to face. Sal soon realizes that during his earlier chase, his vision had been tampered with, leading him to believe he was hit by a train that never actually existed. To lure her out, the detectives devise a plan to hire her, with Sal acting as bait. He goes undercover, fabricating a false identity as a stockbroker who has had an affair with an escort and is now terrified that his fiancée will discover it. Sal reaches out to the woman who calls herself Anon, requesting a face-to-face meeting to erase this incriminating part of his history. They meet on a rooftop and Sal brings her back to his apartment, where the deletion process begins. Meanwhile, Lester is in another room, closely monitoring and tracking her every move. As Anon works, Sal explains that he wants the memory of the prostitute completely erased. She does so with ease, skillfully altering the timeline to fill in the gaps left by the deletion. During their interaction, Anon reveals her motivation. She desires to be entirely invisible, even to the point of not existing as someone else. This is why she avoids using aliases and meticulously conceals all her personal information. After completing the job, she takes the money and leaves immediately, vanishing once again into the shadows. Sal attempts to pursue Anon, but she vanishes before he can catch up. He carefully moves through the corridor with his gun drawn, but she is nowhere to be found. The following day, Sal and Charlie gather with the rest of the team, where they are introduced to a new tech specialist, Sal Frieland. Cyrus successfully hacks into Anon's vision, allowing the detectives to monitor her actions in real time through her own eyes. Lester explains that to track her location, Anon must be active in the ether. Eventually, she connects to the ether and begins replaying a memory involving Jesper Nix, a prominent art dealer. In the memory, Jesper is shown doing business with Max Keener, a known forger. Anon manipulates the memory, erasing Jesper's meeting with Max and replacing it with footage of Jesper pretending to have discovered a painting. Jesper later attempts to sell the forged artwork for a profit. As the detectives work to trace Anon's digital movements, they successfully follow the trail through 12 proxies. But the last one eludes them, remaining unidentified. After spending an entire day monitoring Anon, the detectives are frustrated by their inability to trace her location. At one point, she approaches a window, giving them a brief moment of hope that they might finally identify her surroundings. But, just as they think they're closing in, the connection abruptly cuts off. Sal, bewildered, asks where she went, and Cyrus explains that they lost her. She managed to break the chain of proxies they were using to track her. He suggests starting a new chain, a common evasion tactic, but there's concern about her knowing they are looking at her. Not long after, Jesper Nix is discovered dead, murdered in the same way as the previous victims. While Sal sees this as a serious escalation in the case, Josef, the bureau commissioner, is dismissive, suggesting that the victims brought it upon themselves and that the homicides aren't as significant. Sal strongly disagrees, recognizing the deeper implications and the danger posed by the killer. With the investigation hitting a dead end, Charlie suggests that Sal go undercover once more to gather more information about Anon. This time, Sal poses as a man purchasing drugs, hoping to gain her trust. They meet again at Sal's apartment, where Anon continues her work, deleting unwanted memories and replacing them with whatever Sal requests. As they spend more time together, a personal relationship begins to develop. Anon starts opening up about her problems, creating a bond between them. However, as Sal starts using drugs, Anon grows suspicious. She confronts him, pointing a gun at him and questioning whether he truly has a girlfriend, as his behavior suggests he's single. Sal manages to deflect her suspicion, pushing the gun away, and in a moment of tension, she lowers it and kisses him. They end up becoming intimate that night. Afterward, Anon goes to the bathroom, and while there, she uncovers Sal's true identity as a detective. Shocked and betrayed, she quickly leaves the apartment. Sal hears a gunshot and rushes out, only to find that Lester has been killed, presumably by Anon. Not long after, Anon contacts Sal and issues a chilling threat. She warns him that if he continues trying to find her, she will kill him. She taunts him, pointing out that it's not just that he doesn't like looking back, he can't without revealing who he is. The message is clear: if Sal persists in his pursuit, it will be the end of him. Later, Charlie confronts Sal, expressing his frustration and disappointment. He criticizes Sal for letting Anon escape and allowing Lester to be killed in the process. Charlie doubts whether Sal can recover from this setback, pointing out that Anon managed to see through their defenses, accessing her records and exposing their vulnerabilities. From that point on, Anon begins to torment Sal relentlessly, haunting him with his most painful memories. She forces him to relive moments like being assaulted, chased by a dog, and trapped in a room full of rats. The psychological attacks escalate when it's revealed that Sal's son was killed in a car accident, a memory that deeply scars him. The next day, Sal discovers that Anon has erased all the good memories he had of his family. Desperate, he tries to access those memories, but they are gone. With no other choice, he contacts his ex-wife Kristen, pleading with her to send him any memories she has of their son. To his horror, Kristen reveals that those memories have also been wiped from her mind, leaving both of them devastated. Suddenly, Sal perceives a raging fire in his apartment. Panicked, he pulls out his gun and begins firing in random directions, trying to protect himself from what he believes is a real threat. However, he quickly realizes it was all an illusion, another cruel trick by Anon. The hallucination fades and Sal narrowly avoids shooting one of his neighbors, shaken by how close he came to doing something irreversible. He then hears the sound of an elevator going up and rushes to check, only to find nothing there, further intensifying his sense of paranoia and fear. While driving, Sal's vision is manipulated by Anon, making it seem as if the road is empty. He continues driving, unaware of the real traffic, until suddenly the illusion drops and he's surrounded by cars, causing him to crash into several of them. Shortly after, Sal meets with Charlie. Charlie advises him to take a break and step away from the case, but Sal insists that Anon won't leave him alone. He confesses that she keeps hijacking his vision, making him unsure of what's real and what's not. Sal explains that he's terrified, unable to sleep because she knows everything about him, even erasing all his precious memories of his son Salvador. He recounts how she forces him to relive his worst moments repeatedly, driving him to the brink. Charlie, realizing the severity of the situation, mentions that they're hiring more hackers like her, acknowledging that everything is connected and vulnerable. But when Sal asks how to stop it, Charlie grimly tells him that the only way is to find her. Their conversation is interrupted by an officer who arrives with troubling news. Sal has shot one of his neighbors. The records show Sal pulling the trigger, but he insists that the footage has been tampered with and that he's been framed by Anon. Despite his pleas, the others dismiss his explanation. As a result, Charlie decides to suspend Sal from the mission, forcing him to stay home under constant surveillance. With no other choice, Sal reluctantly agrees, knowing he's being watched at all times. Later that night, Sal pretends to sleep, then sneaks out of his apartment, knocking out the officer assigned to watch him. He goes to Anon's apartment, where she's waiting with a gun. Anon reveals she's being framed for her client's murders, and shows Sal her memory of Lester's death, proving she wasn't the killer. She then escapes. Soon after, Charlie confronts Sal, furious that he disobeyed orders and assaulted an officer. Sal tries to defend his actions, believing Anon is innocent, but Charlie dismisses his claims, suggesting his judgment is compromised. Charlie officially suspends Sal, revokes his access, and places him under surveillance, warning him that they'll be watching. The next day, Sal receives a text from Anon asking to meet. She arrives at his apartment and distracts the officers guarding him. However, the real killer, who has been following her, sneaks in and attempts to kill Sal. In the confrontation, Sal is shot in the stomach. It is then revealed that the killer is Cyrus, the new IT specialist on the detective team who has been obsessed with Anon for years, murdering anyone who had an intimate encounter with her. Realizing that Cyrus can see through his eyes in real time, Sal manages to fire a shot, wounding Cyrus. Sal tries to escape with Anon, but in a desperate move, he blindly shoots again, this time fatally hitting Cyrus. Afterward, Anon silently walks away, leaving Sal behind. Later, Charlie, Sal, and Joseph have a tense discussion. Joseph confronts Charlie, questioning how Cyrus Freer, a man whose records are now completely erased, could have worked so closely with them. Charlie responds that it was Joseph who recommended him, though Joseph realizes that Cyrus manipulated the situation to make it seem that way. Joseph then turns to Sal, demanding to know where the girl Anon is and who she is. Sal, however, says nothing and simply walks away. In the film's conclusion, Sal eventually recovers his cherished old memories and meets Anon one last time. During their encounter, Anon explains that she fragments her life into tiny moments and stores them in the records of others, making her virtually untraceable. When Sal asks why she goes to such lengths to hide herself, Anon reveals that it's not because she has something to conceal, but because she simply doesn't want to share her life with anyone.